Oakland A's UK. Oakland A's UK. The Oakland A's UK. The Oakland A's UK.
Hello and welcome to the Oakland A's UK YouTube channel. I'm Matt Smith, and thankfully we finally have some good news about Major League Baseball. Yes, there is going to be a 2020 Major League Baseball season, a 60-game regular season, Covid-19 depending. It's going to start on the 23rd and 24th of July, subject to Covid-19, and it will lead to a 10-team playoff in October, subject to Covid-19. It's all subject to Covid-19, and yeah, that's a big caveat to put on all of this. But at the moment, there is Major League Baseball on the horizon, and that's something to be happy about. Details are coming out bit by bit, and we should have more details about the exact schedule in the next few days. So we care about the A's, and we'll be looking at the schedule for the A's and our potential 30-man roster and all of that in a podcast that we'll be recording fairly soon. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to our Oakland A's UK podcast on your favourite podcast site to be up to date of when that is published. But here in this video, we will look at a more fundamental question. That is, should there be a Major League Baseball season in 2020? It's a valid question to ask, of course, because this weekend has seen record numbers of COVID-19 cases in the United States, not least in Arizona, Florida and Texas. So is it foolhardy to try and have an MLB season at all? Is it a disaster waiting to happen? Well, professional sports have been going on all around the world in the past few months, and of course some of those places have been doing that in context of much lower cases of Covid-19, so the baseball leagues in Taiwan, in Japan, in South Korea. They've all started up, but the number of Covid-19 cases have been a lot lower there anyway. However, we can take our own examples here in the UK, because let's be honest, the UK has not exactly aced it when it comes to handling coronavirus either. So let's have a look at how things have happened in soccer, in the EPL, as you guys like to call it, the Premier League here in the UK, and how Covid-19 has impacted on the season. You have to put this into some context first, because in the EPL, the coronavirus lockdown came in where teams had 9 of their 38 games left to go, so the season was very much in progress. And of course, in the EPL, it's not just one single self-contained event. The EPL ties into the pyramid structure of soccer leagues in the UK, and also ties into qualification of European competitions too. So scrapping off one season or trying to award winners is much more difficult in the UK EPL system, and it has huge financial implications too. So that's a slight difference between the EPL and MLB. But it's important to note that what we're talking about here is not simply sport, but professional sport. It's easy to say, if you're not earning a living from the sport, that, well, what does it matter if we don't play? But it matters to thousands of people, because thousands of people rely on it for their income, to pay their bills, to pay their mortgage, to pay their rent. And we know it's going to be slightly different where there aren't any fans in the stadium, and there's certainly lots of people who earn money who will not be able to earn money even if MLB comes back or the EPL has come back, because they're not doing their usual stewarding or things around the stadium as they would normally do on a match day. But still, you can't just look at this as sport coming back, it's professional sport. And there is a fundamental truth that we all have to deal with as part of Covid-19, that it's not about putting the almighty dollar ahead of human health. It is recognising that recessions and stress and anxiety and all of that, they kill people too. And we need to make sure that there is a risk-based assessment on all of this, accepting the risk around Covid-19, and that we're not going to be able to eliminate that completely, but we do need to get things back up and running as far as it's safe to do so. Now, much as we would all love for there to be a vaccine very soon, or at least some advanced treatment to make the impact of getting Covid-19 a lot less, We can't guarantee that. We would like to have that in place for 2021, but there's no guarantee that will be the case. So there is a fundamental question here of, if you don't start playing sports now, when are you ever going to bring them back? Because coronavirus is going to be around for many years to come. And if we look at the financial impact on the EPL, then it really shows what the damage can be. So once again, the EPL was in train, so teams play a 38 game season, and most teams had played 29 or so of those games, so had 9 games left. Even though the EPL is now playing out the competition and every single contracted game that was due to be played is going to be played, the EPL are still on the hook for huge numbers of rebates going back to TV companies. The EPL is going to lose at least £330 million, which is just over $400 million in rebates that they have to pay back to their TV rights holders. And again, that is despite the fact that the EPL is going to be playing all of the games they would otherwise have been playing. Never mind only playing a shortened season, they're fulfilling their contractual obligations from a point of view of the number of games they're delivering to the TV rights holders, but because it's all being delayed, it's not being done in the normal time, TV companies have the right to get all that money back. And then we consider the match day experience. So my team, Norwich City, are currently in the Premier League for at least 7 games left before we get relegated again, unfortunately. But in our case, we have a stadium of about 27,000 capacity, and we sell it out pretty much every single game. And in our situation, the club has confirmed that we will lose out on £1.5 million, which is about $1.8 million every single game, simply because we're not having ticket sales and all of the concessions and all of the stuff around the ground on a match day. So that's a lot of money to a ball club, and if you put that in terms of Major League Baseball and say 81 home games that they're going to miss out on, that's a huge amount of money. And I know we all are suspicious when the owners talk about the amount of losses they're going to take, but nobody is arguing that they're not going to take big losses as part of this. And again, it comes back to that fundamental point. This isn't simply about sport coming back. This is professional sport. These are businesses. There are loads of people, loads of companies and suppliers that rely on professional baseball to earn a living. And we do need to factor that in when it comes to is it right and risk safe to come back and start playing again. The most important part of this is the thoughts of the players and the clubs themselves. We're hearing from reporters out there in the States that the vast majority of players want to be getting out there and playing, and the vast majority of clubs do want to be playing too. So if those involved want to be getting going and essentially getting back to work, then that's fine. And of course, the protocols they're putting in place do have exceptions, so people who are in higher risk categories because of personal health themselves or family members, they are going to be able to opt out, and that's exactly as it should be. But by and large, if the workforce wants to get back to work, and of course this is a work that you can't do working from home, then that's their choice, and it's certainly fine for them to get back to work and to start earning their living. But again, we come back to the context of Covid-19 and the increase in cases in the States, and whether it is foolhardy for Major League Baseball to be trying this. Well, if we look at the situation in the EPL, we can see that maybe we need to think a bit harder about what the impact might be. Again, the UK, we haven't done brilliantly with Covid-19 either, so we're probably a good test case to compare to the States, albeit we're a significantly smaller country, both in terms of population and geographic size. In terms of the return of the EPL, they've had a whole round of testing and they've been releasing all of the results. They've had 10 rounds of testing at the time of the recording. And looking at those test results gives you some interesting ideas on how things might go in Major League Baseball. If we look at the results of the EPL testing, when you actually think about it, it kind of makes sense really. When you go to the first few rounds, we've seen a number of cases of positive results. So the first round, they did 748 tests and there were 6 positives. Second round, there were just under 1,000 tests, 2 positives. Third round, just over 1,000 tests, 4 positives. But from then on, the number of positives have been really, really low. Rounds 7, 8, 9, 10, hardly any players have tested positive. Only 5 players over that period have, or or club members, staff members. And when you look at the percentage of tests that is, it is really, really low. And that shouldn't be a surprise when we think about it. It's easy for us to look at the wider context in, say, a US state or here in the UK, think about how case numbers are going up and say, well, this is ridiculous. But we've got to look at the cohort that we're really focusing in on. And ball players, just like soccer players here in the UK, are not the same as everyone else. And that's because for them to go back to work, there are going to be very strict safety protocols in place. Everyone is being tested very regularly in the EPL and the restrictions are really well policed. So the result is that, okay, when people first started going back into training, players were flying in from different countries to join back up the teams. You had kind of a bit of a spike at the start of it because people were starting to really get back into the flow of it. And also in terms of just getting used to the restrictions and how they had to handle themselves in a socially distanced way, but still get on with their work. But once people got into that regime and got used to the processes around it, the likelihood of a player getting Covid-19 has been very, very small. And in particular, the likelihood of one player or club employee giving Covid-19 to anyone else has been really minuscule. That's not to say it can't happen, that's not to say that a small outburst would definitely not take place. But again, you've got to look at the context. Here you've got an employee, a player, he has been tested regularly, say over the last 3 weeks, as has everyone he's been working with, and he's working in a safe environment. So the reality is the likelihood that this person is going to pass on Covid-19 asymptomatic to other players, say a whole bunch of players or a whole people at the club, is actually really low and far, far lower than would be the case in pretty much any other setting, because in our normal lives, we're not all getting tested every couple of days. We're not all getting lots of things disinfected and everything done for us. So I think the risk in terms of Major League Baseball players getting Covid-19 is absolutely there. It's going to be there even if they don't come back and play. And if players are coming back and they're all being tested regularly and there are clear protocols in place that are policed, then the risk, from a risk-based perspective, the likelihood that it's going to significantly increase Covid-19 and you're going to see big spikes of groups of players all going down with it. Actually, what we've seen not only in the EPL but in other soccer leagues in Europe and other places around the world in terms of baseball leagues and Aussie rules football and all things like that, we've not seen, once players have got into the testing regime and people have started following the protocols, we've not really seen, other than a couple of cases, any real instance of players coming back and playing sport, and the result of that has been a whole load of people coming down with Covid-19. So I think it's entirely reasonable for Major League Baseball to be making a return. You're never going to get rid of the risk completely, but we've seen from sports all over the world that it is possible to do it, and once the players are back in a strict testing regime and a strict working environment, they can get back to playing and in effect get back to earning a living whilst doing it as safely as possible. Now, it won't eliminate the risk of there being a small outbreak of Covid-19, and that's something we're just going to have to manage and deal with as and when it comes about. But I'm confident that Major League Baseball will do a good job, and the players and the teams will do a good job in getting baseball back and doing it as safely as possible during this period. So let's be positive about this. There is a risk. There is always going to be a risk, but let's be honest, there's going to be a risk for many years to come. But it is possible for professional sports to come back and to play as safely as possible. As I mentioned at the start of this, we will be doing a podcast in the very near future looking at the resumption, or actually the start of 2020 MLB and what it means for the A's and the A's schedule and the A's roster. So keep an eye out for that. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to all of our social media accounts at Oakland A UK on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. I'm Matt Smith. Thanks a lot for watching.